Welcome to English Stories. Here, you'll improve your English by listening to real, clear stories, slowly told and easy to follow. Steve Jobs was born in 1955 in San Francisco, California, but his life did not begin in a usual way. His birth parents were not ready to take care of him, so they gave him up for adoption. A kind couple named Paul and Clara Jobs became his new parents. They could not give him a rich life, but they gave him something more important: love, support, and belief in his future. From a young age, Steve was curious. He asked many questions. He liked to know how things worked. At school, he sometimes got into trouble because he was bored. He didn't enjoy following rules. But his teachers saw something special in him. One teacher said, "He's different. He thinks in ways others don't." At home, Steve helped his dad fix things in the garage. They worked on cars and electronics. Steve learned how to use tools and solve problems. This hands-on learning made a deep impression on him. When he became a teenager, Steve met a boy named Steve Wozniak. Woz, as people called him, was quiet, smart, and very good with computers. Steve Jobs and Woz quickly became friends. They shared a love for machines, design, and jokes. Together, they built small electronics and fun inventions. Steve was also interested in art, music, and ideas. He liked the beauty in things, not just how they worked, but how they looked and felt. This mix of technology and art would become part of who he was. After high school, Steve went to a college called Reed in Oregon. It was expensive, and his family did not have much money. He quickly realized he didn't enjoy the required classes. He was interested in learning, but only what felt useful or exciting to him. After just one semester, he made a bold decision. He dropped out. But Steve did not leave the college completely. He stayed on campus and slept on friends' floors. He walked long distances to get free meals. He returned bottles to get money. He lived simply, but he felt free. He now had time to sit in on classes he liked, especially one about calligraphy, the art of beautiful writing. That class changed the way he saw letters and space. It taught him how design and words could feel beautiful. He didn't know it yet, but this small class would later help him create the first computer with beautiful fonts and great design. Steve also traveled to India, searching for spiritual meaning. He walked through poor villages, lived with very little, and learned about silence and focus. These lessons stayed with him for the rest of his life. When he returned to California, he worked at a video game company. But the real adventure was just beginning. With Wozniak by his side, Steve was ready to build something new, something big. They had no money, no office, and no business training. But they had ideas, energy, and belief. They worked out of a garage. They dreamed of putting computers into the hands of everyday people. At the time, computers were huge, expensive, and only used by scientists or large companies. Steve believed this could change. He said, "A computer could be like a bicycle for the mind, something simple, fast, and powerful." And so the path to Apple began, not from a university or a company office, but from a small garage in California, where two young men followed their passion and curiosity.
The garage in Steve Jobs' family home was small and simple. But for Steve and Wozniak, it was the perfect place to build something big. They called their new company Apple. Steve liked the name because it sounded friendly, fresh, and not too technical. It was a different kind of name for a different kind of dream. Wozniak built the first Apple computer. It was a circuit board with no screen, no case, and no keyboard. But it worked. Steve saw how special it was. He was not an engineer like Woz, but he understood people. He believed that computers should be simple, useful, and beautiful. He told Woz, "Let's sell it." Steve went to a local computer store and showed the machine. The store owner liked it and ordered 50 units. That was their first real sale. Steve was excited, but they had no parts and no money. So he sold his van, and Woz sold his calculator. With that money, they bought parts and began building the machines, one by one, in the garage. The Apple I was just the beginning. Next came the Apple II. This time it had a case, a screen, and color graphics. It was one of the first computers people could use at home or in school. It was a success. By the age of 25, Steve Jobs was a millionaire. Apple grew quickly. They hired more people and moved into a real office. But Steve wanted more than money. He wanted to change the world. He said, "We want to put a dent in the universe." In the early 1980s, Apple worked on a new kind of computer. It would have a mouse and a screen with pictures, not just text. This was very new at the time. Steve visited a research center called XR Park, where he saw ideas that helped shape his vision. With a team of designers and engineers, Steve created the Macintosh. It was small, friendly, and different from anything else on the market. In 1984, Apple released a famous advertisement during the Super Bowl to introduce the Mac. It showed a woman running through a gray world, breaking the screen of control. The message was clear. Apple was here to change everything. The Macintosh launched with excitement. People loved its design. It had a mouse, windows, and beautiful fonts. Ideas Steve had thought about since college. For the first time, a computer felt personal. But not everything was perfect. Steve was passionate and demanding. He pushed his team hard. He wanted everything to be just right. The shape, the sound, the box, even how it opened. Some people loved working with him. Others found it difficult. Apple's board of directors, the people who helped lead the company, began to worry. The Mac sold well, but not as much as they hoped. Steve argued with other leaders in the company. He had big ideas, but he didn't always listen. As Apple grew, they brought in a new CEO named John Sculley. At first, Steve and John worked well together, but soon they disagreed. Steve wanted to move fast and take risks. John wanted to slow down and protect the company. The fight between them grew. Finally, in a surprise move, the board took Steve out of his leadership role. In 1985, Steve Jobs left Apple, the company he had started. He was only 30 years old. It was a painful moment. He later said, "I felt like I had been punched in the stomach." Everything he had built was no longer his. He felt lost. But deep inside, he still believed in his vision. He could have retired. He had money and fame, but Steve was not finished. He said, "I still loved what I did." So he decided to start again, not to copy the past, but to create the future.
Steve Jobs had lost his company. He had no office, no title, and no team. But he still had something more important: his ideas. He still believed in technology, design, and the power of simple, smart products. So in 1985, Steve started a new company called Next. His goal was to build a powerful computer for students, scientists, and creative thinkers. The machines would be strong, fast, and beautifully designed.
He spent millions of his own money on the company. He wanted it to be perfect. Next computers looked amazing. They had black boxes and clean lines, but they were expensive and not many people bought them. Some said Next was a failure, but behind the scenes, important things were happening. The software on Next computers was strong and advanced. One day, it would become part of Apple's future. While working on Next, Steve also found another project. In 1986, he bought a small animation studio from filmmaker George Lucas. It was called Pixar. At the time, no one thought it would succeed. It had no big movies, no money, and no clear path. But Steve saw something special. He believed computers could help tell great stories. He supported the team and gave them time and space to create. For years, Pixar worked quietly. Then, in 1995, it released Toy Story, the first full-length animated film made entirely on a computer. It was a huge hit. Audiences loved the characters, the humor, and the message. Pixar became famous overnight. Steve became even richer than before. Through Pixar, Steve learned more about creativity, teamwork, and storytelling. These lessons would help him later when he returned to Apple. Meanwhile, Apple was struggling. After Steve left, the company had changed. It made many products, but few of them were special. Sales were falling. Customers were confused. Apple had lost its way. In 1996, Apple made a big decision. It bought Next, the small company Steve had started. At the same time, Steve returned to Apple, not just as a founder, but as a leader. At first, he came as an advisor. Then, in 1997, he became CEO again. Apple was near collapse, but Steve had a plan. He cut the number of products, he simplified the company's focus. He said, "We have to say no to 1,000 things to say yes to one great thing." His first big success after coming back was the iMac. It was colorful, friendly, and easy to use. It did not look like other computers. It looked like fun. People noticed. Sales improved. Apple was back. Then came the iPod, a small device that lets you carry 1,000 songs in your pocket. It changed how people listened to music. Then came the iTunes Store, a simple way to buy songs legally online. Steve had changed music, not just computers. But he wasn't done yet. He had a new idea, a phone that could also be a music player, a camera, and a tiny computer. In 2007, Steve stood on stage and introduced the iPhone. The world changed again. The iPhone brought touchscreens, apps, and mobile internet to millions. It became part of daily life. Apple sold millions of phones. Other companies tried to copy it, but Steve had set the standard. In the years that followed, Apple introduced the iPad, the App Store, and more. Under Steve's leadership, Apple became one of the most valuable companies in the world. But behind the scenes, Steve was sick. In 2003, doctors found cancer in his body. At first, he kept it quiet. He tried new diets and treatments. He had surgery. For a time, he seemed better, but the illness returned. Over the years, his body grew thin. He spoke softly, yet he kept working. He came to the office.
He led meetings. He launched products. He gave beautiful speeches. He once said, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever known to help me make big choices in life." Steve had faced failure, sickness, and loss, but he never stopped building, dreaming, and pushing forward. He believed in living with purpose, in doing great work, and in loving what you do.
Steve Jobs believed that technology was not just about machines, it was about people. He said, "You have to start with the customer experience and work backward to the technology." This idea shaped everything Apple made. When Steve returned to Apple, he brought focus. He looked at the company's long list of products and cut most of them. He told his team to work on just a few things, but to make them great. The first big success after his return was the iMac. It came in bright colors, with a round shape and a handle. It looked fun and friendly. It was also easy to set up and use. People loved it. The iMac made Apple cool again. But Steve was already thinking ahead. He asked, "What if you could carry all your music in your pocket?" This question led to the iPod. The first iPod came in 2001. It had a simple design, a white body, and a wheel to scroll through songs. It could hold 1,000 songs. It changed the way people listened to music. Then came the iTunes Store. Before, people shared music in ways that were often illegal. The iTunes Store gave them a legal, easy way to buy songs one at a time. It worked with the iPod and changed the music industry. But the biggest change was still coming. Steve wanted to build a phone that could do much more than just call people. He imagined a device that was also a music player, a camera, and a tiny computer. In 2007, he introduced the iPhone. The iPhone was a phone with no keyboard. Instead, it had a large screen you could touch. You could tap, swipe, and zoom. It was new. It was exciting. Steve said, "Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone." The iPhone changed everything. It started the smartphone era. People used it to send messages, take photos, check maps, and play music, all in one small device. Later, the App Store allowed developers to create apps, making the iPhone even more useful. Apple continued to grow. In 2010, the company introduced the iPad, a tablet that let people watch videos, read books, browse the internet, and work, all from one device. It was thin, light, and easy to use. People used it at school, at work, and at home. Steve believed that design mattered. He once said, "Design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works." That's why Apple products looked beautiful, but also worked simply. He also cared deeply about the Apple stores. He didn't want them to feel like normal shops. He wanted them to be clean, open, and full of light. He wanted people to touch the products and ask questions. Today, Apple stores are found all over the world. While Steve was leading Apple to great success, his health was getting worse. His illness returned, and this time it was more serious. Still, he kept working. He came on stage to present new products, even when he looked thin and tired. In 2011, Steve knew he could no longer lead the company day to day. He stepped down as CEO and passed the job to Tim Cook. In a letter to the board, he wrote, "I believe Apple's brightest and most innovative days are ahead of it." On October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs died peacefully at the age of 56. The world reacted with sadness. People lit candles outside Apple stores. Presidents, CEOs, and ordinary fans shared messages. They thanked him for his vision, his passion, and the way he changed their lives. Steve's story was not just about technology. It was about belief. Belief in ideas, in beauty, and in doing what you love. He once said, The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. His life proved it was true. Steve Jobs left behind more than just computers and phones. He left behind a way of thinking about design, work, and life. He believed that people should follow their hearts even when the path is not clear. He once said, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life." One of his most famous moments came in 2005 when he gave a speech at Stanford University. He spoke to students who were about to begin their adult lives. His words were simple but powerful. He told 3 stories from his life. The first was about connecting the dots. He explained how dropping out of college had allowed him to take a calligraphy class, a class that later shaped the look of the Macintosh computer. He said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward." His second story was about love and loss. He spoke about how he was fired from Apple and how that painful moment led him to start Next and Pixar. He said, "Getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. It gave him a fresh start." His third story was about death. He talked about learning he had cancer. He said that knowing he would die soon helped him focus on what truly mattered. He said, "Death is very likely the single best invention of life. It clears out the old to make way for the new." The speech became famous. Millions watched it online. Many people said it helped them see life in a new way. Steve's words reached far beyond business. They spoke to the heart. Even after his death, Steve's ideas live on. Apple continued to create new products, always trying to follow his example. The iPhone kept improving. New iPads and MacBooks were released. The company grew into one of the most valuable in the world. Steve's personal style also left a mark. He was known for his black turtleneck, blue jeans, and sneakers. He spoke simply but with passion. He often walked back and forth on stage, showing products in a way that felt like magic. People listened. People believed. But his life wasn't easy. He could be hard on others. He wanted perfection and didn't accept excuses. Some people found him difficult, yet even they often said they respected him. He pushed people to do their best, sometimes more than they thought possible. Steve's story teaches us that success does not always follow a straight line. He was adopted, he dropped out, he was fired, he got sick. But he also followed his dreams, trusted his heart, and worked with passion. He once said, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." That simple line became a message for anyone trying to find their way in life. It means keep learning, keep exploring, and don't be afraid to take risks. Today, millions of people around the world use Apple products. They listen to music, talk to friends, take pictures, learn, work, and dream, all with tools Steve helped create. But more than the tools, it's the story behind them that inspires. A young man who dropped out, who failed, who started again, and who, through courage and creativity, changed the world. Steve Jobs did not just build machines. He built a future.
Vocabulary summary and discussion question. In this story about Steve Jobs, you learned many useful words to describe life, work, and innovation. Here are some of the most important vocabulary terms. Adoption, the act of taking a child into a new family. Drop out, to leave school before finishing. Calligraphy, the art of beautiful writing. Millionaire, someone with $1 million. Personal, for one person. Directors, people who guide a company. Failure, when something does not succeed. Animation, a film made from drawings or computer graphics. Collapse, to break down completely. Reinvent, to make something completely new. Tablet, a thin computer with a touchscreen. Innovative, using new ideas. Speech, a talk given in public. Invention, something new that is created. Perfection, being the best or without mistakes. You also saw how sentence structures can create emotion and focus. For example, he was adopted, he dropped out, he was fired, but he also followed his dreams. This kind of structure helps learners see contrast and flow between ideas. Now here's your discussion question. If you could invent something to help people in the future, what would it be and why? Thank you for listening.